All right. So, welcome to the She's Supply Chains podcast. We are so excited to have Cheryl Bethune here with us today.
Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here.
So, I met Cheryl, this is probably like 21 years ago, I think.
It
Yeah.
was. It was
Yes. I
down
was
in
a very,
Covington,
I was
Georgia.
young. I know. I didn't know anything about anything, and Cheryl, she helped me a lot.
I think Cheryl has helped all of us a lot over the years.
Hey, Katie, where did you meet Cheryl?
Okay, so Cheryl, you might not remember, but I remember you talking at a continuous improvement conference. And I actually asked a question, and afterwards you gave me a book. You're like, because you're brave enough to ask a question, you get a book. It was called Influencer. So I don't know
Yes.
if you remember that or
Yes.
not.
Oh my
And then I got to know you a little bit more later on, especially before moving to India and everything else. But
yeah. Well, I have fond memories of my time at General Mills and especially with both of you and the impact that you guys were making then, but now just phenomenal. Phenomenal leaders.
Thank you. Okay, Cheryl. So we want to know more about who you are, both personally and professionally.
Perfect, perfect. So Cheryl, I hail from Detroit, Michigan, so raised in the Midwest. And I say that because that gave me values that shape who I am today. So this
mm,
idea of hard work and humility and resilience and respect from others all come from, growing up in the Midwest. Personally, I am a wife, a mother, and someone who has a very large extended family full of aunts and uncles and cousins. And the reason I say that is because that circle of people keeps me grounded and keeps
mm,
life in perspective. So family has always been a source of importance, of strength, joy, and actually accountability in my life.
Mhm.
Professionally, I began my career as an engineer at Procter and Gamble, and enjoyed that. But I've discovered over time that while I enjoyed solving technical problems, I was even more energized by helping people and teams and organizations perform at their best. And so, with that, that led me to pivot into human resources at General Mills, where we all met, and where
yeah.
I had the opportunity to work across the US, Asia, Europe, and Latin America. And that brings me to today, where I serve as the Chief HR Officer for Bio-Techne Corporation. And for those who may not know about Bio-Techne, it's a smaller company in the life sciences industry, but we make it easier for researchers and clinicians to really move science forward. So, kind of
Hmm.
providing solutions and diagnostics to really support making people live longer and healthier lives.
That. So you're out and about in the Twin Cities and you meet somebody. How do you describe what you do day to day?
Oh, that's a really really good question. How I would describe it is I help organizations succeed through people. So
Mm.
my job is to make sure that we have the right leaders, that we have the right capability and the right culture for employees and people to thrive to enable business results.
Oh, I love that. Okay, Cheryl, one of the things, so I tell people like, not everybody loves HR all the time, but you are my favorite HR person. And I wonder it's because maybe you were an engineer first. I don't know. But can you talk about, you talked about starting out in engineering, moving to HR. So how does that kind of engineering brain, like you said, solving complex problems help you when you think about human problems, especially when you're talking about talent and then as all companies are looking for profitable growth. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, engineering, as you all know, um, taught me to think in systems.
Mm,
Mm.
And, to ask what drives outcomes, what constraints exist, and how do you piece that together and make it connect? And that mindset has helped me tremendously in HR because many people assume talent challenges are people issues, but
Mm.
often they're system issues, right?
ooh,
So they're unclear roles, they're weak
Right.
processes, poor rewards or incentives,
Mm.
leadership behaviors that create unintended results. So I've learned firsthand is don't think of them as people issues, to step back
Hmm.
and say, what's wrong with the system? What's wrong with the system? And, I learned that firsthand. I was in my engineering days in the plant. I was a project manager on a major technology initiative. And as we moved through the work, it became clear that technology was only half of the challenge and that the
Mm.
success depended on how the organization needed to change alongside of it. So, how roles were designed, how people were developed, and how the right skills and having the right leadership in place. So, that experience kind of really taught me that technology changes systems, but people sustain change. And that same is true for growth. So profitable growth is just not a marketing strategy or financial plan. It's about the talent strategy as well.
Okay, so this kind of oh, go ahead, Courtney. Were you gonna ask something too?
I have a follow-up on this.
Go
Yep.
for it.
So, okay, do you think if you have really strong systems that you can make up for not a strong leader?
That's a great question. So here's the way I think about it is processes and systems allow people to be good. Right?
Okay.
You think about statistics where you have kind of a lot of noise in the system and a lot of
Mhm.
variability. If you have good systems and processes, they lessen that noise and
Mm,
variability. So you're probably going to get everyone bring them up to good, or
okay.
up to average and up to the norm, right? But great leaders are, right? I always say good leaders, they do good in good systems. But great
Mhm.
leaders, it's who they are.
Mm.
Right,
Okay.
it's their values, it's their mindset. So I would almost say great leaders are gonna be great anyway, regardless of the system. The system is for all the rest of us who are just trying to be good.
Okay, so tying back to these systems, you spent a lot of time as an HR manager in supply chain. So you're very familiar with all different parts of supply chain, manufacturing plants. Oftentimes, as we're trying to do things, we can get hung up. I like this idea of like starting up a new line or a new system. And it feels like it's the people side that we tend to maybe not get right. What's some advice you might have for like how do you maybe take that step back and figure out what are the right systems that we should be looking at? Because you're right. I do think we think it's a people issue.
Mhm.
Um, but people come in trying to do their best each day, and so have you set them up for success? So what are some of those systems that, as we're trying to as our listeners are out there, whether it's a warehouse, a plant, maybe a new planning system, what are some things that they could be thinking about?
Yeah. The way I think about it is, manufacturing is ultimately a people business that just
Mm,
Mm,
happens to run through machines, systems, and processes.
mm,
So when you're in manufacturing, you're in the plant, you're really in the people business, right? Because machines do what they're programmed to do. But people, they bring judgment and motivation and this real life complexities
mhm,
that, they bring that into the workplace every day. And that human side, it actually can be harder to lead, right?
mm,
But it's also the real advantage. It's where the advantage come from because people do bring their judgment. They bring ownership, adaptability, and especially what's needed in our dynamic environment now. And again, that they give that discretionary effort, which is needed to go from good to great.
yeah,
And then,
okay.
Katie, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about frontline leaders,
Mm,
as we talk about the backbone and the systems that are in
yeah,
the manufacturing facilities. I often say that some of the hardest and most important jobs in any company are those frontline leader roles. They set the tone, they build trust, they coach performance, and they reinforce that standard. So frontline leaders to me are often the difference makers in scaling
mm,
results. And so we have strong people at the plant and all the way from the plant leadership to
yep,
team leaders. I notice that you just don't see it on the front line. You see it across the business. You have better, more sustainable execution, which drives stronger customer outcomes and more sustainable results. And so I really want to use this platform to say thank you. Thank you
mm,
to all those frontline
mm.
leaders everywhere. You guys are the difference makers.
Oh,
love
love
it.
it. Okay, I'm going off reservation a little bit because something you said triggered a conversation. I was on a panel this morning talking about AI and career and education. And I loved how you talked about like what a person offers versus, because we were talking about, in the workforce, everyone's trying to figure out like how to use it as a tool, but keep that people element. And as you think about those things you said that like what we inherent as people bring, how have you thought about that with like technology and AI, but like leveraging it, but still being true to the people side, which you clearly in the systems that make, you say great leaders, et cetera. So I don't know, way off topic, but
Yeah,
just wanted
yeah.
to pick
You
your
know,
brain.
I think of AI. So AI is here to stay, right?
Yeah.
And I tell everyone you can't avoid what is, and it is here. So right, we can't avoid or not consider AI, but AI, like any other technology, should be an enabler. They should enable people to be more successful, right? It's a tool, but
Mm,
what it doesn't have is it doesn't have community.
Mm,
It doesn't have collaboration, right? It doesn't have heart, and
mm,
that's what people bring. So even when people come to me and say, "Hey, what are the skills that I will need to develop more of in a world which increasingly uses AI?" I say those things. I say, "Hey, the ability to collaborate and draw
mhm,
connections." Judgment is becoming even more powerful, not necessarily knowledge, right? Because AI is going to
mhm,
take care of the
mhm,
knowledge,
yeah.
but do you have judgment? Do you have a point of view? And can you make a choice, right?
mm,
Can you
yeah,
make a decision? And then also heart, right?
mhm,
Like any other technology or tool, it can be used in multiple ways and
mm,
used to do multiple things. But are you going to have the heart, coupled with the principles and the values to use it
Mm.
for good?
you have an awesome answer. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. So, you have lived and worked in Singapore, India, Europe. So, what is the biggest mistake that American leaders make when trying to export our kind of US centric culture or leadership to different teams in Asia, Latin America, Europe? So, can you talk specifically about what we as American leaders can learn as we work across the world?
Absolutely. And we do make mistakes. I will have to say I do think it's unintended. Unintended
Mhm.
mistakes. It's just
Yeah.
it's informed by our world, right? Our world in
Mm,
which we live. But it's really assuming that what worked or works in the US will automatically work everywhere else.
mm,
So the strongest leaders that I've seen, they understand that there are some things that do need to remain constant. Values, principles,
Mm,
clarity of purpose. They know those things need to remain constant, but they know that some things often need to adapt locally because, cultures cannot be copied and pasted across borders. Yeah, you guys know just as well as I do that, different regions around the world, they have different market dynamics,
yep.
mhm,
customer expectations, communication styles, even views of hierarchy. So the most
Mhm.
mhm,
effective global leaders, they respect those differences without losing both the core of who they are and the
Mm.
core of who their company is.
mm,
Uh, building off of that, it's
Yeah.
I actually think it's becoming more demanding for global leaders because you're often managing more and more variables at once.
mm,
Especially in this time and day. There's even more ambiguity. There's
Mm.
more volatility and complexity. So you do have to stay steady, stay
mhm,
grounded, to stay curious and adapt in real time. The goal is not necessarily what I call global uniformity. It's really
mm.
about global alignment with local relevance.
I love that advice because I think you could even use that if you were moving to like a new company. Like it's understanding, respecting what's there and still tied like you said, align with your values, aligned with who you are. And I don't know, like it's like bringing the best of both.
Absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. I tell people when I go to a new role, a new company, a new country, I focus on three things. I put three things in my brain. The first thing that I say to myself is, "You are not the first smart person to do this role. And I have to tell myself, right? Because when we go into a role or we get promoted, we're like, oh my gosh. And I remind myself that you are not the first smart person to do this. There have been other smart people who have done this role, who have done this role. The second thing that I say to myself is, and they did the best job that they could with
Mhm.
the knowledge, resources, and priorities that they had at that time,
Yep.
Mhm.
right? And you have to remember that they did the best they could with the knowledge, resources, and priorities had at that
That's a good
time,
one. That's
right?
a good one.
But then the third thing I say, my knowledge or the knowledge of the company or team at this time, my resources, again, with advances in technology, advances in data and insight, and my priorities may be different.
Yeah.
So that allows me the freedom to do something different. So to respect the past and decide because my knowledge, resources, and priorities are different, I also can lead and behave differently. Right. So I always tell myself those three things to again ground myself, respect the past, but
Yep.
also decide to do
Mm.
something different if that is what's called for at the
Yep. We had a guest early. This is resonating with me. I think it was Deborah, and she shared honor the past, be
Mhm.
honest about today, and then be hopeful about the future.
Mhm.
And I really like
Percent.
that. It's
I love
very
that.
similar to
I
this.
love
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so one of the other things that you did, and I think this applies a lot in supply chain right now, well, you were in the Mumbai office. So for listeners that don't know, Mumbai is a massive, massive city. Um, all kinds of different places that you can work, and you can have a really hard time with retention, especially if it's a company and you're, you know, a global company, you have a great presence, you kind of train people up really well. Like people come and they want to take that talent. And while you were there as the HR director, you got the retention up to 88%, which is kind of unheard of in that market. And would just love to hear like what your approach was with that, how you went through and did that, because I think we're seeing this right now in a lot of our operations and facilities is this higher turnover as people are leaving. And so how do you create this culture where people want to stay and you can get to numbers like that?
Yeah. Um, huh. First let me say that pay matters. Some people don't like to say that. It
I feel like this is the engineer in you coming out. You're like, let's start with these numbers.
let's start with the numbers, right? Pay matters, and you have to pay people fairly and competitively.
Hmm.
Um, because if pay is out of line, it becomes the headline, and
Yeah.
that's what I tell people. If
Mm.
it's out of line, it becomes the headline,
Ooh, I like that
and it's
one.
a
Yeah.
distraction. And it's a distraction
Mm.
very, very quickly. So you have to pay people competitively and fairly. But once you do that, once you take it off the table, then it really becomes about growth, respect, belonging, and how people are seen and are valued. So that's what we focus on. So, excuse me. So in Mumbai, we focus heavily on development, strengthening the leadership, recognition, creating a culture where people believe that this is where they could build their future. So
Mm.
it was about a future, not just a job. And that was
Mm.
unique in that particular market. And so we understood that while it was highly competitive, employees have options. So the real question was really, why would talent choose to stay with us?
Mm.
And what we really focused on is people will stay if we allow them to grow, to contribute, and to feel that they matter, right? That they belong.
So don't make the pay a distraction. I like that.
Yep,
Well, it takes off the table and then you can focus on the other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so Cheryl, you've led talent across 14 countries. What is the one universal trait of a high potential leader that transcends language and culture?
Um, that's a hard one. But if I had to choose one, it would be learning agility, right?
Mm.
The ability
Oh,
to learn quickly, adapt to new situations, absorb feedback, right? You have to have the ability to take in feedback and keep growing as the environment changes, right? So we all know it's a cliche, but in today's world, what got you here won't get you there. So it's the
yeah.
leader who keep evolving, they tend to advance. So I often tell people, younger in their career, be good at something, but be great at learning, right?
Oh, that's
So
such good
I
yeah,
advice.
know.
so expertise is going to get you in the door, right?
Yeah.
People want someone who's good at something, right? But learning agility and what keeps opening those doors throughout your career.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So that's my one. But given who I am, I can't just give one. I do have one more. I do have one more. Um, and people don't talk about it a lot, but what I often see in the highest potential leaders is that they show maturity beyond their years.
Mm.
Mm.
So as responsibility grows, so does the weight you carry. And so people who can carry that responsibility with good judgment and composure tend to stand out. So, the best leaders are the ones who I tend to admire don't necessarily know it all, but they're the ones who keep learning and who keep growing.
Yeah.
And they bring this calm judgment when it matters the most.
Those are
Yeah,
2 really good ones. I know so many good nuggets in this one.
I know.
Um, okay, so you talked a little bit about this before when you talked about creating a culture. People want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to feel like they're included. How do you do this again? Maybe in like a global context where I think sometimes we think about like diversity, but that can look and feel very different depending on the country you're in, and then even within that country, like what part of the country you're in. So, how do you think about that from like a global standpoint in creating again diverse teams and the sense of inclusion?
Yeah, Katie, you're right. Diversity does look very different depending on the country that you're in. The culture, the
Mm,
history, and in
yeah.
some places even their legal framework.
Mm.
Hmm.
Right?
Mhm.
Diversity, it looks very different. So, what I tend to focus on is inclusion,
Mm.
right? Inclusion. And being included to me is not necessarily about a program, it's more about the human experience,
Mm.
right? Do people feel respected and heard and valued for what they bring? Um, but it does mean that global leaders have to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah.
You cannot apply the same playbook everywhere.
Mm.
So our previous question, you can't take the concepts and the tools and the programs of diversity and inclusion that may work in the US and necessarily apply them, everywhere around the world. But what you can use are those core principles, and the core principles that everyone wants dignity and the opportunity to contribute fully.
Mm.
So belonging tends to translate everywhere
Yeah.
because when
Mm.
Yeah.
people feel included, they bring more of their talent, they bring more of their ideas and their energy to the work that they do.
So, Cheryl, you have moved your family across the world multiple times. What has living in so many different cultures and countries taught you about resilience that you probably wouldn't have learned staying in Minneapolis, Minnesota?
Yeah, that's as I think about it, it taught me that, that home is not necessarily a place, right? And my kids have taught me that. They've always called home the place where we lived at the time, not
Mm,
necessarily where they're from,
Mm.
right? So that helped me reframe that it's not about a place, it's about values and where your family is,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And again, you guys know this just as well as I do that, every move really asks something of you, right? You have to let go of what's familiar, learn new norms, build new relationships, and become comfortable being uncomfortable for a while, right? And that in and of itself builds resilience in a way that comfort rarely does. The other thing that it's taught me is humility. Like when you are the newcomer, you tend to listen more,
Mm,
to
Mhm.
observe more, and realize that really there are different ways to be right. And I had to learn
yeah.
that, right? There are different ways to be right. That humility and being around the world has taught me that. And then lastly, for me personally, it's taught me confidence. Once you have to rebuild community and find your footing in new places over and over again, you start to trust yourself differently.
Mm.
Mm,
And
Mhm.
you know you can adapt wherever things take you. So resilience to me is not about being unsettled. I learned to be very comfortable in being uncomfortable and in being unsettled because
Mm.
I have confidence that I can steady myself in the end.
Yeah. I
I
remember talking about this with you, Cheryl, before moving to India, and those words really stuck with me. And I often, like you said, like each move like takes something of you. I actually feel like that move there was the move that really helped me get super comfortable being uncomfortable. I'm an engineer, I'm a planner. I wanted to know how my day was going to go, all these things. And that's not really like life there at all. And like if you fight that, like you're just I don't know, you're gonna be, I think, maybe disappointed and kind of miserable instead of embracing what it
mm.
could be and how things operate there. But you shared that again many years ago and it still stuck with me. And I think that was like one of the biggest lessons I took from that time there. Yeah.
I think I had moved so much before international, didn't I thought like, "Oh, it's like moving to a different." I don't know, in my mind, I was like, "It can't be that hard," and it was so hard. Because I like, "I've moved like 7 times. It can't be this complicated," and I definitely underestimated just telling Katie this, like, hearing another language, I don't know, for you all the time, like, it was like, I get home and I'll be like, "I'm just gonna sit here in silence," and I had a whole new appreciation for people that move to a country without support. Like,
Hmm.
Absolutely.
we moved with the support of a company, with language coaches and just
All the
like
things.
all
Yeah.
all the things, and it was so hard, like, really hard, and I moved to Switzerland. It wasn't even like I was going and I think about people that just, like, come here and figure it out and don't speak the language and like, real I mean, I don't think I had the mental fortitude. I just don't think I could. I mean, and it's amazing to me, and I just have a whole new appreciation um, for that. My both 2 au pairs are from Brazil, and they used to ask me to come to do things with them that I thought, "Well, why do you want me to come?" Like, go to get your license or just like some of the basic things. But then I realized I was struggling with that, the base like it's so
Yeah.
much and you don't understand how things work and and even if you know the language, it doesn't translate well and then you do gain that confidence eventually, but I came back and I was like, "Amanda, I'm so sorry. I just should have went with you to all these places because it is stressful." I mean, I remember when I was telling them I was moving and I was like, "I need to forward my mail, to" they were just like, "I don't," and I was just like, "Never mind." And I came back with my admin and I was like, "Tell them what I want to do." Like you get tired or I would just give up sometime in the grocery store, just like, "Okay, I don't even know." Like it's yeah, so I just think the small things can really, really throw you over the edge. Maybe I'm just a delicate flower, but I don't know. Um,
You adapted. I mean, you adapted to the
You
environment.
did.
I'm sure both of you, learned in these environments that, okay, I can't rely on my knowledge,
Mm,
mhm,
right? Again, we're in the world of that now with AI, right? So these are transferable skills,
yes. Yeah.
right? My knowledge is not what's going to get me ahead. And up until
mm,
that time, it did, right?
mhm,
I
Yep.
kind of, or at least I thought I was one of the smartest people in the room, if not the. But at that point, it's like, you know what? I I know nothing. I
mhm,
know nothing of how to do work in this country
Yep. It's
and
humbling.
how to get things
Yep.
down. It's humbling, but what it does is, again, it allows you to work through others. It
mm,
Yep.
allows you to build
Yep.
leadership skills of, okay, I'm not supposed to know everything. I'm supposed to drive clarity,
mm,
drive
mhm,
direction, um, make sure decisions are made consistent with our values, establish boundaries, remove barriers. And so you're forced to do that. And
mhm,
you're forced to be that because you're not the expert.
Yeah.
You're
mhm,
not the one with the most knowledge. And the other thing again, it helps you to trust yourself.
Yep.
mm, mhm,
Earlier in my career, I always thought, confidence came first. But what that taught me was courage comes before confidence.
Mm,
Right? Have the courage to step out and again, to be uncomfortable, right? And
mhm,
yep.
that will build your confidence because you learn to trust yourself that, you know what? No matter what happens, I can depend on me to get through this.
So good. All right. I'm going to change a little bit because I did want to talk about this before we get into some of the mentoring questions. Ooh, back here in the Twin Cities now, and you're on 2 boards, 2 nonprofits, YMCA and the Washburn Center for Children. How has that experience How has that impacted your role as like a CHRO? Like, does it, or maybe it doesn't, but I was just kind of curious with those two, I think, unique experiences. Does it change like how you think as like an enterprise leader?
Katie, it reminds me that leadership is stewardship.
Mm,
Hmm.
You know, I think of the phrase, I'm full of quotes. I pick up quotes from a lot of different places, but the quote that to whom much is given, much is required.
Yeah.
mhm,
Leadership to me is both a privilege and a responsibility. I always tell people I don't have to lead, I get to lead.
yeah,
And I never forget that there are people who depend on me, on the
Yep.
decisions that I help shape for livelihoods, for opportunities to feed their families, to send their children to college. And so that nonprofit board work, it keeps me grounded and keeps me connected to the realities of the community. It reminds me that decisions that are made even inside organizations ripple outside into homes, into neighborhoods, into the future of others. Um, and that's why leadership fundamentals matter. So whether you're at a nonprofit or in a corporate setting, many of the fundamentals are the same. Mission clarity, sound governance, accountability, sustainable impact. All that matters because at the end of the day, leadership is about creating outcomes that serve people.
mm.
Like we create outcomes that serve people.
We love quotes, by the way.
We do.
I'm full of them. I have all these quotes. If you'd see my office, I have a bunch of stickies and they're full of quotes. And
Oh,
I
I
tell
love
people
that.
I steal from others. There's like none of them are originally my own. But I hear someone say something, I was like, "Oh, I like that," and I write it down.
Okay, Cheryl, if you could go back to the young engineer at P&G in 1992, what's the one piece of leadership advice you'd give her to prepare for the amazing global executive that she was destined to become?
Young Cheryl, what would I tell young Cheryl? Um, Raise your hand sooner, right?
Mm,
Mm.
You don't need to know everything before taking the next step. Right? So earlier in my career, and this is often for women, right? So I say this to women, to everyone, but particularly to women, that as I mentioned, I thought confidence needed to come first. I thought I needed to be fully ready and confident before taking on bigger opportunities. And what I learned again is that confidence often comes after courage, not before it.
mm,
So
Yeah.
I would tell that young engineer, trust your instinct, right? Trust
mm.
yourself, be willing to stretch and not wait for perfection. Growth happens when you're still trying to figure it out.
Okay,
So good.
Cheryl, do you remember this raise your hand story? Do you remember this?
I do not.
Oh my God. We'll edit if we don't want to talk about it. But so when we were at, I think it was like a tea or something, and we were all, I don't know who was all there. Me and you were there, and the story.
I do remember it now.
Oh my gosh. So there's like a bunch of women. We're there having a great tea, and we have some mentors there, kind of like, having a great little time. And then I don't even know what the lead up was, but they're like, raise your hand if you want to be a vice president or whatever, C-suite executive, whatever. Me and Cheryl are like, pick me, pick me. No one else raised their hand.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then it was this like awkward kind of like, but it was, I don't know how many of us it was. I just remember that story so vividly. And then like the rest kind of got chastised for like, why aren't you raising your hands? And it was this whole thing. So you did raise your hand.
I did, but Courtney, that was a learned behavior,
Yeah.
right? It was a learned behavior,
Mm.
to get to do that. Part of it was learned. The other part was um I had to be comfortable wanting power,
Mm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
used to not want to admit that, um, that I wanted power. And my definition of power is you own or influence decision. Power to me is you decide. You decide. And I used to think, oh, power is an ugly word. Don't raise
Mm.
your hand and say you want power.
Yeah.
And then I realized, no, you do. You
Mm.
want to make decisions or you want to influence decisions and you want to continue doing that at higher and higher levels. So, Courtney,
Mhm.
when that came is after I got comfortable or courageous enough to say, yes, I want power.
You're much more thoughtful than me. I was like,
Corey's like, I just want to be a
Ah,
VP.
sure.
But you know what? I love that because I think it is this. Sometimes it can feel like this, like ugly word, or like I
Mhm.
shouldn't want this. It feels greedy, or I love that though, and getting more comfortable saying like, no, I want that power because I can do good things with that
'Cause
power.
men feel very comfortable
Absolutely.
with it.
I know.
They don't care at all. They're like, "I'll
They
take
do.
it if you don't want it."
Absolutely. And Katie, I like your ad is and to use my powers for good,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because I can
Yeah.
do good, right?
Yes.
I with power, with resources, with access, I can do good.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the stats I love is, like I said that, at least in I think it's Minnesota stat, but like 80% of female entrepreneurs, like, invest back into their communities. Over men. Like
Hmm.
when we do have back to that power for good, when we do have companies and resources, like we're pouring it back into to the communities that we live in and support. And I think that's like it was just such an
Yeah. Do
interesting
the power for
stat
good.
to me. Mhm.
Absolutely. Use your powers for good. Before we move on, can I,
Yeah.
because this is who I am, I thought of one more um piece of advice. Piece of advice
Ooh.
that I would give myself as we were talking. And that would be to stay open to paths I did not plan,
Mm.
right? So some of the best opportunities that I've had in life, in my career, and frankly, in relationships are the ones that I didn't map out in advance, right? So I have learned to ask why not versus ask why, right? So when possibilities or when things come up, I start with why would I not do that versus why would I do that? Because, it leaves the possibilities open.
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes after I
Mhm.
go through the thought process, the answer is no. But again, it's not because I'm scared
Yeah.
or not because I haven't thought through the possibilities. And so, again, be open to paths that you did not plan.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes back to what you're talking about for being curious and wanting to
Mhm.
learn, and you just don't know where that's going to lead you. Yeah.
So Cheryl, you gave me some advice one time, and I keep this. Maybe it's on your post-it notes, but I love it. I'm an overthinker with every decision, even small ones. Sometimes, so I call Cheryl, and she's like, "What's the worst that could happen? Like, what decision can you make that you can't undo?" And I was like, "I don't know." Then she was like, "And what's the probability of that bad thing that you think's gonna happen really happening?" And I was like, "Probably very little." So she's like, "So go do it. Like, what do you?"
What are you
But it
waiting
was
for?
Absolutely. What
but
are
it
you
just,
waiting
like,
for?
never occurred to me because in your mind, you're like, all the risks, all the things that could happen, and all the reasons why I should not do something, but then you were like, "If you don't like it, fix it, do something else," and I was like, "Oh, like, that's a possibility."
Absolutely. Absolutely. I remember my first job in Asia when I went to Singapore to that role. So that was my first time being head of HR for a business, right? For a profit and loss of P&L. And what was scary about that to me is I had not done that in a market in the US that I was familiar with, right? So now I was going to go do it in a market that was very foreign to me, in a culture that was very foreign. So it was scared. And I said, oh, what if I fail? What if I fail? And Courtney, I did my self talk, right? I said, okay, so what if you fail? Like, what if you fail miserably at this role?
Mhm.
And so then I thought, you guys are going to laugh at this. I said, well, it's going to take them at least 6 months to determine how bad I really am,
Ah,
right? It's going to take them 6 months. Then I said, then it's going to take them another 6 months to really decide that they've assessed it right, that she's not bad. And then it's going to take them another 6 months to figure out how to get rid of me.
So you're like, I've got 18
I
months
said,
to figure this
I got
out.
exactly. I said, so at its worst, I got 12 to 18 months in a differential role
hmm.
where I'm learning and gaining experience. So even if the worst thing happens to me, really, the biggest problem, it's an ego problem.
Yeah.
It's not a
Mhm.
learning problem because I would have learned. I would have
Yeah.
grown.
Mhm.
I would be better off having done this even if I failed. So the only thing I need to work on is my ego,
Mm.
and then it's gonna be okay.
So good. Okay. So I had one more question, and this one is, you every time we meet you or talk to you, you are always energetic. You've always got the advice, always.
Uh,
What do you do? Because I also feel like you have a very full life as well. What are some things that you do during the week or whenever it is, maybe it's daily, whatever it is, to like help you like refill your cup? Because I do feel like you're one of those people that when um everybody sees you, like their cup is filled.
Mhm.
You always take the call, you've got the advice, you've got the way of like looking at things. But what about for you? Like what do you do to maintain like your energy?
yeah. For me, it actually does start with people. Right?
Okay.
So I'm an extrovert, right? So I take in energy, I take in information, I take in joy from being with others,
Yeah.
right? So actually, in a stressful week, if I'm really stressed, right, I go out and talk to people.
Mhm.
I talk to people, and what who I typically talk to is young people, right? So I talk to my children and their friends because they just have a level of enthusiasm
Mhm.
Yeah.
and just a different perspective. And I always learn something new. So I talk to young people, or this was a little bit unconventional, or I talk to people who actually view the world very differently than me.
Mhm.
Right? So my husband thinks I'm a little strange with this, but I actually don't run from disagreements or differences or conflict, right? Because he calls me the great debater. Yeah, I actually lean into it,
Mhm.
right? Because again, you talk about stress for me is being narrow,
Mhm.
right? And having tunnel vision there. And what kind of releases that to me is when I've actually broadened my perspective and my view and kind of who I am and who I am. So actually that to me actually de-escalates stress.
Mhm.
And especially as I think about problem solving and things in the workplace is
Yeah.
when I'm stuck, I go out and get a lot of different perspectives and I
Yeah.
actually search for the perspective that's the most different from the one that I have.
Mhm.
'Cause it does one of 2 things. It either sharpens what I believe, and I'm like, "Yep, I heard them," and, now I'm gonna really double down on what I think, or I was like, "Oh, you know what? That's good. I didn't
Yeah.
think of that.
Yeah.
I would have never thought of that."
Yeah.
So, it changes my view, completely. So again, narrow to me is stressful, being curious and perspective, it kind of what expands things and it actually de-escalates and takes down my anxiety.
Love it.
Oh my gosh, Cheryl, this has been so amazing. And thank you for spending time with Katie and I. You have been so influential and helpful. And I tell
Yes.
everybody, I would not be close to where I am without you and Val. You guys, like, I just always, yeah, just always you're always available and always ready for the call. So we so appreciate you.
Well, you both are most welcome and most deserving. And know that I am honored and humbled to be a part of this experience with you all.
Oh, thank you.
What you have
Cheryl, I want to hug you right now.
Yeah, group hug. But I mean, you guys should know this, and I know others have probably told you, but what you have created here is
Mhm.
is more than a podcast.
Mm,
um, it's more than a conversation. You have created space. You have created permission.
mm,
You have created opportunity for voices to be heard.
mm.
And that makes a difference. And so know that
Thank
what you are
you.
doing it's valuable, it's needed, and it's making a difference.
Oh, thank you. I
I
might
know. I'm like,
cry.
thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank
It's
you
like
so
a
much,
great way to
Cheryl.
wrap it.
I know. I'm like, okay, we're done. Nothing else to be said.